So we have this phenomenon of these mass shootings. The person who is committing these mass shootings has a fascination with firearms. They're nihilistic. They have a desire for infamy. Doing this sort of activity puts them in a place where they can kill themselves because they want to die by going out in a blaze of glory. They can go on a rampage and they put themselves in places where they will be met with violence in the violence that they're putting out. So they're going to schools with the police, who are going to come, to police installations, to military installations, places where they're going to be met with that fire and get into a firefight. We believe that some of this is the influence of media and culture, as well as the characterological deficit of the person. What can we do to address this going forward? And then, of course, there is the underlying issue that we've talked a lot about of just suicidality, particularly among, it seems to be mostly men in a certain age bracket. So there is that suicidality layer in there as well. What can we do about all of this?
Yeah, that's obviously the most important question. So we just address each of the different potential contributors. So with regards to firearms, for example, we need to be more responsible with firearms. I mean, seriously more responsible. So that includes, gun laws, but we can manage this without too many restrictions and restrictions on freedoms. For example, just to throw it out there, I'm not sure how many people might be familiar with smart gun technology or some sort of like something that would be like a smart gun technology. So, for example, there are many ways of explaining, or there are many types of smart gun technology. But for example, smart gun technology would be like using a fingerprint to activate a weapon. That's like smart gun technology. But there are other ways of doing this. I know a while back they were thinking of, along with every gun, selling, and this doesn't even have to be necessarily very high tech. It can be very basic. But for example, I think at one point they were thinking about, with every firearm, also selling a ring, so that the firearm would only work when it's within some certain, a few feet or 10 feet of the ring. So, for example, that would really limit illegal use of firearms. And just to be clear, almost all weapons used in mass shootings are actually legal firearms, but there are still, firearms, especially in many other types of crimes, illegal firearms are used, like firearms obtained, illegally, stolen or whatever, or given to people when they shouldn't be given to people. And that would limit those. That would also limit the many mass shootings that are perpetrated, using a quote unquote legal firearm, but when that legal firearm is used, for example, by like the son of a person who actually owns it, or the brother or something like that. So that's one example.
So with that element, so people who are committing these mass shootings, are you saying that they're not often the type who is already collecting many guns and has their own weapons that they've legally accumulated? That they're more
They
likely...
are. They are. They are. Most often they are. But even with that, the smart gun technology. So I think about 15% are perpetrated with illegal firearms, and then another, I forget the exact numbers. Another maybe 15% are perpetrated with legal firearms, but used by like a close family member or friends of the person who has a legal firearm, like who was given the firearm, like quote unquote legally, like it wasn't stolen from them or legally transferred to them. So that, for example, would address 30 or 35% of mass shootings that
Okay.
are perpetrated with illegal or quasi illegal firearms.
Okay. 15% for
Exactly.
each of those elements
Yes.
could knock out 30% of the cases where that person would not be able to use a gun if there was some sort of limit on the gun
Yes.
connected to the owner.
Yeah, or severely limit that. And of course, those numbers are much higher for other types of gun violence, just to be clear. So the other types of gun violence, like the percentage of, or the prevalence of the use of illegal weapons, for example, among many other types of gun violence, is much higher. So that's just so the smart gun technology is one sort of potential intervention that could be used.
And a safety thing in the home too, I would think.
Of
If you
course, yeah, anything,
if you're a parent, you have a gun, and that way, unless it's where you can see it, no one else could be using it.
exactly. That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, simple strategies like there really are solutions. It's more about the when you talk about if there's a will, there's a way, or whatever. I think we have the ways. It's more about the wills at this point. But there are many. So for the 5% of cases in which mental illness is the problem, we need to do better at making sure, especially people with in the early stages of psychotic illness, receive treatment, because virtually all violence, especially murder, mass murder perpetrated people with mental illness, are people in the early stages of their illness who are unmedicated. So these people need to be medicated.
To go even deeper on these ideas, you can watch my full episode using the link in the description or the box on the screen.